And welcome everybody. I hope you are bright-eyed and chirpy. Welcome to National Science Week, and of course welcome to STEM Alive for Kids. How are you doing? You doing good on this lovely Monday morning? I hope you are. I'd just like to quickly thank, of course, the Department of Education and the Peter Underwood Centre for making this possible. Thank you guys so much. But most importantly, and I think you want to get stuck into it this morning, do you know how energy's made? What is energy? Is food edible? And how does energy relate to food? Well, I'm glad you asked these questions because this morning we have a very special guest with us, a very special one indeed. We have one Associate Professor, Evan Franklin from the University of Tasmania's School of Engineering. Hi Evan, how are you?
Good morning, very well, thank you.
So apparently you study energy, is that correct?
I do, I love energy. I'm always thinking about energy, and I study energy at work, and I talk about energy at home.
You sound like you're a high energy person as well.
I like to be.
Now, you know, it's pretty early in the day, Evan, and I haven't had anything to eat yet. Apparently you might be cooking us something special today.
Well, yes, I've brought in my breakfast, and the reason I've done this is, do your mum and dad ever tell you kids that you've got to eat a good, healthy breakfast, and they say you need it because you'll need all of the energy for the day? They probably don't give you a coffee. And so this is the sort of breakfast I would normally start with, maybe some fruit, a bowl of oats, and most days that gives me enough energy to get to work and get through till lunchtime. But mum and dad were right. You do need a lot of energy to do stuff. And so on some mornings I'll have this breakfast, and then I might have some toast as well. Definitely a banana, there's lots of energy there. And another bowl of breakfast perhaps, another bowl of oats here. Sometimes even an egg and maybe another apple. And the reason I have all of that is, if we can just put those slides up for me.
Beautiful.
Is some mornings I'll get out on my bike, and I know that if I'm going to ride up lots of hills, ride to work, ride for a couple of hours maybe even, that I'm going to need a lot of energy. So there's a lot of energy in food. Mum and Dad were right, but that's only one form of energy, and that's actually not the form of energy that I normally work with and study at work. So you asked the question, Sam, what is energy? It's a really good question.
Energy? Yeah.
What is energy? What is energy? We know that there's energy in food, but what is energy? Well, energy is something that can do work. And work's a funny word we use in engineering and physics. It means the ability to make something move or heat up or shine brightly with light. And they're all forms of energy. And energy comes in lots of different forms that we're familiar with and we use every day. And I'm going to show you a few.
So it's not the kind of work where the little electrons put on a little suit and tie, grab a suitcase every morning and head into the office kind of thing.
Not quite. Here's some images with a lot of energy. So these are some explosions. Lots and lots of energy in an explosion. A big, massive waterfall, water rushing over. You can almost hear it, can't you? There's so much energy in that water that's rushing over that waterfall.
Wow.
Lightning.
That's very cool.
Yeah, this is a really cool photo.
Yeah.
There's so much energy in that lightning, but only for a very short amount of time. And one that I missed, actually, I'm going to go back to. We got a new puppy at home, and there's so much energy in a little puppy bouncing around. But this is all energy that is very hard for us to use. And in society, we need a lot of energy, and I'm going to talk about in a moment why we use all that energy and how much of it we use. But we found a way to use energy more effectively.
Okay.
So here, this is energy that you would be familiar with. At home, we've got a fireplace. That's how we heat our house up. And so wood contains energy, much the same as food does. But we can burn it and make heat, and that's a different form of energy. And so we've converted stored energy in wood to heat.
Interesting. So it's kind of like we can burn wood for fuel, we also sort of burn food for energy, sort of kind of thing.
Exactly.
We absorb it.
In fact, we sometimes have a choice of whether we make food for eating to turn into energy that we can use, or use it for energy, for example, for driving cars. And I'll come back to that at the end. It's
A car can eat it instead.
a car can eat your breakfast. Here's another form of energy that we use a lot of, and that's oil or petrol. And you can see it coming out of a hose on the right, but then we use that in cars and aeroplanes. In fact, a lot of the energy that we use in the world comes from this form of energy, and then a lot comes from this. This is coal. If you burn coal, you get a lot of energy out because it contains a lot of potential energy, we call it.
Okay. Why is it called potential energy?
I'm going to come to that. I'm going to come back to the egg and show you.
Oh,
what I mean by
exciting.
potential energy, yeah.
Yeah.
Because one of the things with energy is it comes in lots of different forms, but it's only useful if we can convert it from one form to another form. And here, you can see here we've got water flowing out of a pipe. It's a bit like that waterfall, but now we're controlling where the water goes. And one of these pictures here shows a big dam, and at the bottom of that dam is a large power station that converts that moving water into electricity. And that's a form of energy that we use a lot of in our everyday lives.
So is that because the water is so heavy as it like pushes down under its own weight in the dam, it goes through a little fan kind of thing like a pipe at the bottom and it comes out?
Exactly, yeah. It turns the potential energy, which is the water sitting up high, and I'll come back to that with the egg, into kinetic energy, which is when something's moving really fast, spins around a turbine
I'm doing kinetic energy, come on.
and turns it into electrical energy.
Wow.
So this is actually a really important thing about energy. You can't make energy from nothing, and you can't make energy disappear. And I think it's time for the egg.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, it sounds like we better go to our top-down
move.
handy-dandy camera.
Yeah, there's one more form of energy that you see here, which is wind, can be a really annoying type of energy. But also, if you can convert it to electricity with wind turbines, it can be really useful. So let's look at our egg here.
Looks tasty.
This is from one of my chooks at home, actually.
Oh.
Nice speckled egg. At the moment, it doesn't seem like it's got much energy, but I'm going to do some work. That is, I'm going to lift it all the way up here. It's not all that far, but it did take a bit of energy, maybe a few bits of oats that I needed.
Yeah.
Now it's got potential energy because if I drop it, it can gain speed, and speed, when it gains speed, is kinetic energy. So I can convert potential energy to kinetic energy when I drop it. Should I drop it, Sam?
Oh, yeah, all right. Let's see what that potential energy can do.
It's going to turn into kinetic energy, and then it's going to do something else. And I want you to be really quiet and listen, because you might hear the form of energy that it turns into. Smash! And you saw it speed up very quickly. Hard to see it. Then it went smash, and it made noise. The energy we put into it from my oats turned into potential energy. I dropped it. It sped up and got turned into kinetic energy, and then it hit the desk, and it actually got turned into that energy got turned into noise. That's a form of energy.
Wow.
And also some heat, although not much. It's not a hot egg anymore. So we've converted energy from one form to another. And that's what happens in everyday life all the time. We change energy from one form to another into a form that we can use it. And now I want to have a look, if we can go back to those slides, at some of the ways that we need this energy.
Okay. That's a really big egg.
That's a big egg. This is actually another form of energy that we get a lot of, and I'm going to come back to this, and we can convert it into electricity as well.
Ooh.
But what do we use energy for? Well, in the city, there's all sorts of energy being used. Look at all the lights, cars, buses moving around. They're all using energy in some form. At home, when you're cooking dinner or breakfast, if you have an egg, like I sometimes do, not raw, by the way, I like to cook it, we use heat. That's a form of energy that we use. We all love playing on our iPads or iPhones or devices or watching TV. That's a form of energy. We need electricity. It might, in Tasmania, at your house, it might have come from that power station that we showed, the big dam.
Oh, so that dam was here in Tasmania, was it?
That was here in Tasmania. It's a really as an energy geek, I love going and visiting that dam. Look at all these lights on in the city buildings. Really busy city. Lots and lots of energy being produced for that city. Getting around, moving, cars, bikes, trains, aeroplanes, ships, they're all using energy. And here's a great example of, well, this train, you can see the way it's shaped is designed to go super, super fast. Sometimes it's called a bullet train.
Wow. That's why it has a long nose there.
It's got a long nose because it's really aerodynamic. But the energy that it's converting from is electrical energy. You can just make out the wires above it, so it's converting electricity into mechanical or rotation on the wheels, and then it's converting to kinetic energy with that train whizzing along at high speed. So converting energy, and we use so much energy every day. In factories, we use energy to make things. In fact, in most countries, maybe a quarter or a third of all the energy we use is going into making things, manufacturing things, making drinks and cars and clothes and all of the things that we need every day in our life.
That looks like there's some delicious apple juice there.
It does look like delicious apple juice.
So energy is in the apple juice as well.
Well, the energy was in this apple, which I either chose to eat, and I can see you eyeing it off. I know you haven't had breakfast, Sam.
Yeah. It's looking mighty good.
Or it could be in that apple juice. But also it takes energy to put the apple juice into the bottle and to make the bottle. Energy everywhere in our lives. And I want to show you now how much energy we actually use in the world, and talk about how much energy we've got available. So I'm going to start with, I've got a bunch of different balls.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the best...
Probably the top-down camera, I think, would be the best one.
So here's a little ball. You can see the size of it in my fingers. Oop, I'll get into the middle of the camera there. This ball represents the total amount of energy that the whole world uses every year.
Wow.
So it's actually a huge amount of energy, but I've condensed it down into a little tiny ball. So just remember this size, and I'll keep this ball here. Now, that's the total amount of energy every single year that the world uses. I brought in a tiny little coriander seed. It's very hard to see.
How small that is.
That's the amount of energy that we use in Australia.
Wow.
So small. I can't really hold that one very easily. So that's how much energy we use. What about the amount of energy that we have got available to use? And this is now becoming a really important question for the whole world to answer. How much energy do we need? How much energy do we have, and where do we choose to get it from? So I've got some other ones in here to show you. Let's start with oil. Okay. So the oil that we use to put petrol into our cars. This ball represents the total amount of oil that there is in the planet that we could dig up.
But it's bigger than the other one.
It's bigger than the other one, but you imagine how many times can we put this little ball into here?
Wow.
I don't know, maybe 30, 40 times, maybe not even that many, before we'd use up all of the oil. So there's quite a lot of oil, but this is the amount. Once we've used it up, it's gone.
Oh, wow.
There's a similar amount of gas. So you saw that cooking, the hot plate with the cooking of the egg. That's using gas.
Okay.
That's about the same amount of gas. So we could use that for maybe 20 or so years if we used that for all of our energy, and then it's gone.
Okay.
Coal, you saw that truck that I showed you?
I did, yes.
This is the amount of coal that we've got.
Wow.
Well, I haven't mastered this camera, have I? This is the amount of coal that we've got.
Wow.
Quite a lot.
That's a fair bit.
We could use that coal for quite a number of years before we run out. But once we use it, it's gone. But the other thing that the world has found out, and I think everyone's realised now, is if you burn all of that coal and all of that oil and all of that gas, it creates carbon dioxide. And that does some pretty bad things to the temperature of the planet. That's science that's now been proven. And so people are starting to look at other forms of energy that don't do that.
Okay.
Here's one that you don't hear much about in Australia, and we're not going to talk about much today because it's a really complex one to talk about. But if we used all of the nuclear fuel, so that's taking fuel that contains huge amounts of energy and small amounts of special material, radioactive material, this is the total amount that we've got in the world. So we could use that for a little while, but then it's gone. So then we start to think about energy like some of those ones we showed you before, like wind and water and solar.
Wow.
Those ones aren't energy that's within the Earth's crust that you dig up and then it's gone. Those are ones that we have every year, time and time again. They're called renewable energy. The first one I'm going to show you is water, because we've got a lot of water in Tasmania. In fact, in the last 24 hours, I got very wet
There you go.
outside.
That's just
There's been a lot of-
potential energy stored on you,
It
ready
is
to go.
potential energy. It's a bit like that egg. The water that's on the ground now or in the lakes or in the ocean, the sun is going to lift up. It's then going to rain into those dams, so it's higher up, and then it'll run through
Wow.
that turbine and make electricity, and then it'll be lifted up again. It goes round and round. It's renewable energy. There's quite a lot of it, but if we took all of the known... I'm going to have to move those other balls out of the way here. Hang on a minute. Crowding out my image. If we used all of the known lakes, rivers that we could dam up and turn into hydro or water electricity, this is how much we could make a year.
Wow.
Not quite enough, is it? But there's still quite a lot.
Yeah.
But then you've got to be really careful about where you want to build those lakes, because sometimes you might have a town or a city there, or maybe you've got a beautiful forest that you don't want to remove. But that's hydro.
Well, goodbye, hydro.
Goodbye, hydro. Then we look at wind. This is the amount of wind energy that we could make, electricity, every year if we put wind turbines, and I had that picture on that one slide, wind
Yeah.
turbines, on every land mass
Wow.
that makes sense. Not everywhere, but in places that are windy. So there's quite a lot of wind. We could make this much energy every year, which is more than we use in total,
Wow.
but that would be a lot of wind turbines.
That would be a lot. And I guess to make that turbine, we would have to use maybe some of the other things like the coal and the fuel and all that as well.
That's true. That's true. Although once you make enough wind turbines, you can use those wind turbines to make more wind turbines,
Ah.
because you do need energy to make all of that material. Okay, so there's one that I'm missing, isn't there?
I think.
My favourite energy, actually. We didn't see much of this yesterday. We haven't seen much of it today. But solar.
All right.
This is the
How
amount.
much solar is there?
If we put solar panels, on every bit of available land, this is the amount of energy we would make from.
We got to.
hard to
I'll
get
go.
that
There we go.
comparison,
Okay, I'm
isn't
in the
it?
corner. There we go. That is a lot of.
There's a lot.
of energy. There you go.
There's so much energy. This is how much energy
That's that.
lands
Yeah.
on the Earth, on the land masses where people can build solar panels every year. It's way more.
I gotta show. Hey kids, what do you think about this? So this is how much. That is the amount of solar energy that we have. Holy moly! I just got to do a quick comparison. So this one's the amount of energy that we use. The small blue ball. This is the amount available with solar. That's a lot.
There's a lot.
That's a lot. Hang on.
So we use a lot of energy, for lots of different things, and it's good. And we have to choose where we get all of that energy from. And more people are getting it from solar and from wind. But still, we have to choose where we want to get it from. And I think in future there's going to be even more of this. Now, there's a big problem with solar, which everyone knows. The last couple of days, there hasn't been much sun. At night time, there's not much sun, and so then you need some other way to store that energy. And there's a few different types of energy storage that we use. Remember, we can convert energy from one form to another. So, do you remember I said for hydro, which is where the water goes up with the sun, gets lifted up, then rains into the rivers and lakes, and then goes down through the pipes
Yep.
through the turbine, the spinny fan thing,
We can all spin in school. Let's go, guys. Come on, here we go. We're spinning.
and makes electricity.
Yeah.
Well, we can actually take lots of solar if we have a huge amount of it, which we do, and we can make that water go back up the hill. Now, it takes energy to make it go back up the hill, in the same way it took me energy to lift my egg from here up to the top camera. It takes energy to lift water from the bottom up to the top of a hill. And we can do that and store that energy and then use it later. And then the other technology that everyone knows about is probably batteries. If you've got a device like a tablet at home or a laptop or at school, you know that you have to plug it in to charge it up. And we can use those same batteries to store energy and then use it later when we need it.
Interesting. So is the reason that we send the water up the hill using the solar, spinning the turbine, so that we can then use gravity to let it under its own weight to push through back down? So is gravity a kind of energy?
Gravity is a way of describing potential energy.
Ah.
Yeah, if you've got a gravity field, which we have on Earth, and you move something against it, so lift something up against the way that it wants to go from gravity, then you're putting energy into it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a way of storing energy via gravitational fields. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we use a lot of energy. We can get energy from lots of different sources. We can convert it from one form to another form of energy. And I started with food, and I wanted to show you another picture.
All right.
I'll just
Go to our slide.
Oh, here we go. And I wanted to ask you now, is that food or is it energy?
What do you guys think at home? Do you think it's food or do you think it's energy?
I like corn. I like to eat corn off the cob. I especially love the way corn has turned into corn chips.
Oh,
I don't know
yes.
how they do that, but it's fantastic.
It requires energy though.
It requires energy to do it.
There you go.
So we normally think of this as food. But next time you're at the petrol station with your mum or dad or your brother or sister and they're filling up the car with petrol, have a look at the options. There's usually 3 or 4 different options for filling up your tank with petrol. One of them is usually green and it says plus or E10 or plus 10% ethanol.
Okay.
That one has got mostly petrol, like the one I showed you before, that picture I showed you before of it coming into that big tank, that yellow sort of oil.
Filling up all the stuff.
Filling up, yeah. But 10% of that, so a small fraction of that, is made up of ethanol, which is something that we produce from either corn, usually, or sugar. So we've decided we'll take big fields full of food, and they could be food, or we could turn them into a form of energy that we can then use, we can then burn in a car engine. And so now you can buy petrol that has some of that ethanol, which is something that you can grow and grow again. But there's a big question about whether that's the best thing to do, given that there's a lot of people in the planet and a lot of people need a lot of food. Should we grow food for food, or should we use some of that for energy? And I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone really does yet. It's just all part of that big question of how do we get enough energy to use for all the things we need it for, while still having enough food.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? You know, if you grow something and it's edible, but then you put it into the car and the car eats it and you don't get to eat it instead.
Yeah.
That's it. And it takes energy to do both things, and then, you know, the energy that comes out of it, it's very interesting.
It is. That's why I really like studying energy.
Yeah. Maybe that's what you can do at school. At the moment, you can ask yourselves and have a discussion about maybe what would be better for corn, to use it as fuel or to use it as food. And don't put a corn cob in your parents' petrol engine.
You won't be very popular.
Won't be very popular at all.
You'll be doing jobs around the house for 20 years just to pay that off. So I think we were going to take a break, but I just wanted to show you a couple of images. This is 2 different cities in the world, because we've talked about energy and how we use it, but one thing that's really interesting is some people use a lot more energy than other people. And we might, I think, be leaving you with an activity that you can do after this show today to sort of look at how different it is from one country to another. This is a very famous intersection. I think it's Shibuya intersection in Japan.
Wow.
And very, very busy. But look at all those bright lights and advertising and shops with flashy signs out the front. It's a city that uses a lot of energy, and people there use a lot of energy. If you compare that against also a bustling, busy marketplace where people are buying and trading food and other goods, a lot less energy used. And this is also a question that people are trying to answer. How much energy should we all use? Should we use unlimited amounts of energy, or should we be thinking about the best way of using energy?
I think that's a really incredibly big question,
It
isn't it?
is.
You know, how much energy do you need to use? How much energy do you guys use at home? How much energy are you using right now watching this? Fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Well, thank you very much, Evan. That's a lot to think about, isn't it? We're gonna have to have some interesting questions, and those questions are going to be provided by you. That's right, you. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and in that time, come up with some questions you'd like to ask Evan about energy, food, who gets to use what, how much is made, and make sure that you mention in your question your first name and your school. That way we'll be able to give you a shout out at the same time. So, 5 minutes, we'll see you back then. Welcome back. My. We have just a couple of questions. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get through all of them today because some of them are super fascinating and
Good
very
questions.
interesting. Absolutely. So, what do you think, Evan? Should we dive straight in?
Let's do it.
All right. So, very first question off the rank here is, how fast does a bullet train go?
Oh, I love this. They go about 300 kilometres an hour, so maybe 3 times as quickly as you would in your car.
Wow.
And they are fantastic. I've been on one, and everything just whizzes by. It's incredible.
So pretty much as fast as Sonic.
As fast as what? Sorry.
As Sonic. Don't worry, it's a video game character. It's okay. It's all right. and so they're powered like. So you said the wires are above them.
Yep.
But how do they get the energy into the train? There's not a very long extension cord, is there?
No. Has anyone been to Melbourne? I'm sure you've probably all been to Melbourne and seen the trams. They have the thing over the top that runs against the wires. So it collects the electricity from the wires down into the engine or down into the motor of the train, and that's it.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Here's a good one from Kathleen, who's currently being homeschooled. Hello, Kathleen.
Hey, Kathleen.
And she asks, what subjects do you need to study energy or get into perhaps engineering?
Well, this is an interesting thing. Energy covers so much territory now. So technical stuff like I do is engineering, and you need to do maths and physics and maybe chemistry, those types of subjects. And then you can get into science or engineering and study energy. But energy also is a big topic that's being discussed in social science research. So learning how to deal with energy for people, how people can use energy best. Politics, energy's in everything at the moment. But the type of energy we've talked about mostly, it's science, maths, those types of subjects.
Fascinating. Meg from Farn, she's in year 6. Hello, Meg.
Hey, Meg.
Asks, hydrogen energy.
Oh, yes.
Where are we up to in that research? So have we done our homework on hydrogen? What's happening?
We are still doing our homework on hydrogen. I didn't mention that before as an energy source because we talk about hydrogen energy. It's actually a way of storing or carrying energy. So one of the problems with electricity, for example, is you've got to have those wires to carry it somewhere. So that train needs to have wires where it is. It's very hard to send it long distances or send it across the sea. Whereas if you can store that energy in a form that you can transport, and hydrogen is a great form for storing energy and transporting it, then we can use it elsewhere. And So there's a lot of work being done on researching hydrogen energy. It's actually very easy to make. You take electricity, you put it into water with some other things, run electricity through the water, and it makes little bubbles of oxygen on one side and little bubbles of hydrogen. You probably do the experiment in grade 9 or 10 at high school.
Yeah.
Then you capture that hydrogen. Now, obviously, it's a lot more sophisticated than that in a big hydrogen plant, but that's the new way of making hydrogen, and takes a lot of energy to make the hydrogen. But then when you take the hydrogen and you put it into what's called a fuel cell, or if you burn it, then you combine it back with oxygen and you get electricity out. And you get maybe 50-60% of the electricity back from what you put in, and so you can store and use that energy later.
Fascinating. So it takes energy to make energy, and it doesn't always mean that the energy that you store or make is actually bigger or greater than the energy you put into it in the first place.
Yeah, in fact, scientists, engineers are always trying to find ways to make that process more efficient. But every single time you convert energy from one form to another, you don't quite get all of the energy. Even when I used my energy to lift the egg up to the top here, I put a bit more energy into lifting it than the potential energy that it got. When it fell, it had some air resistance, and so it didn't quite gain all of that energy as kinetic energy. And then when it smashed, most of that energy went to noise, but some of it went elsewhere. And so,
Like on me.
like on you, Sam. And so, yes, same with pumping water uphill, storing energy in a battery, creating hydrogen. We store some or most of that energy, but there's not 100% of the energy. And there's a lot of research in trying to make that more and more efficient. And that makes it cheaper. And cheaper is good because people use more of that source of energy or storage of energy.
And if it's cheaper with the nicer renewable energy, that means it means that it's better overall for everybody.
Yeah, and so with hydrogen, there's a lot of work being done at the moment to work out if we can have a lot of solar energy or wind energy, and when there's lots of sunshine in the day, convert that to hydrogen, and then later on, either at night or when we want to drive our car around or take an aeroplane or a ship somewhere, we convert that hydrogen energy or stored energy back into some form that we can use. Remember, energy is never made or destroyed, it's always just converted from one form to another.
Basically, we just take energy and we just move it around the place wherever we need to move it.
It's like that old story of the dollar coin, that gets passed from one person to another and just gets cycled all the way around.
Hey, the velocity of money, that's an energy of sorts, I suppose.
Yes.
Now, Lachlan from East Tamar Primary School asks, how much energy is produced each year in Australia, do you think? Do we know? How would we find out how much energy is used? How maybe can all the kids at home find out?
Well, do you know what?
What?
Lachlan, that's an excellent question, and that's one which I've made an activity sheet for students, if you want to do it, if your teachers would like to help you do it.
That's pretty exciting.
To find out that answer, to find out how much energy we use in all of Australia every year, and therefore how much does each person use, and then to compare that against some other countries. So I could tell you the answer now,
But we won't spoil it.
I think that's your work to do.
Excellent. You'll all be able to do that after this session. You'll be able to turn on all the lights, plug in all the hair irons, turn on all the toasters, and your school will love it. I promise you that. So,
but I will give you a hint, or not a hint. This won't help you at all. But this toast, which is it's getting a bit cold now.
I mean,
but it's
it
still
does
looking
look
delicious, isn't it?
It
Sam?
does. There you go.
There's a piece for you as well.
Oh, beautiful. There you go.
If you think about the amount of energy that every person uses every day, imagine putting the toaster on, turning it on in the morning. Forget the fact that the toaster would end up a burnt little crisp bit of cardboard.
It's become carbon.
It's
like energy.
Carbon.
Yeah.
That's actually true. It would, the toaster would, if it was on all day, would be the sort of the amount of energy that your family would use on a typical day. But don't do that. Don't turn the toaster on all day. That's not a good idea.
No, there you go. But there you go. So Energy. So toast is energy. You heard it here, folks.
Yep.
First, there we go. Thank you, Lachlan. All right. Now this is another interesting here. We have from here we go. So Phoebe from Kempton Primary School
Hey,
asks,
Phoebe.
"Is it dangerous to use too much energy?"
That's a really good question.
Because I'm thinking, there are two ways I think about this question. Number one is if I go around and I grab one end of a big wire and then another end and I use myself as the middle, that's dangerous because I'll probably turn into the burnt toast
You
at
will.
the end of it. But I guess the other kind of dangerous one is if we use all the coal and all the gas and things like we were talking about, that's sort of more broadly dangerous in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if we use unlimited amounts of energy, then other things happen as well. So remember, every time you convert energy, it's not 100% efficient, and so something else happens. My egg dropped, I created some heat. If we just use huge amounts of energy, then we'll also create more and more heat. If we get our energy from burning coal and gas and oil, then we also produce greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, which you've probably learnt about at school, and that heats up the planet. And so it's almost like a slow kind of dangerous. And actually the world has started to work this out in the last 20 or 30 years. They've gone, actually, hang on, we've been using more and more energy each year. We still use more and more energy each year, but that's having some bad side effects. So let's think about whether we should or can do things that use a bit less energy. For example, you could travel from Hobart, which is where we are, to Launceston in a car with one person that uses a lot of energy, or you could travel with three people, if you all need to go, in a smaller car that uses a lot less energy. And really, all you needed to do was get from Hobart to Launceston. So the amount of energy you use, you can kind of choose. And we have a lot of choices, and people are realizing that, yeah, actually using a lot of energy in the long run is kind of like a slow type of dangerous. And so we're starting to think about how we can change the way we use energy.
That's interesting. And I guess it's kind of like a school bus. When you're getting picked up to go to school, all the different students get on the bus, but there's still only one bus. And so
Yes.
every student that sits on that bus, even though it's using the same amount of fuel, it's more efficient because more people are travelling to the locations they need to get.
Yeah. So for a bus is a really good example, actually, because if you have about 4 or 5 people on a bus, that's the amount of people you need to use the same amount of energy as if all those 4 people took cars. So once you go more than 4 or 5 people on a bus, you're saving energy compared to if all those people drove. And you can fit, I don't know, 40 or 50 or 60 people on a bus. So it's a really good, efficient use of energy, actually.
And if you're a clown, you can fit 40, 50, 60 people in one car.
In a
It's
little
very
mini.
handy. It's great. It's very efficient then. Moving along. Now here's a very, very fascinating one. So Ula from Farn asks, do we use more energy each year? So once upon a time, we would have used very little energy, burning like sticks and so forth, for
Yes.
heat. But do we use more energy more and more? Like, is it going up?
It is going up, and it's been going up since, you might have heard of the Industrial Revolution. This is something which we could do a whole show on.
I know.
It's a really interesting, or a whole series of shows. But 2 or so hundred years ago, people discovered that they could harness energy and use it to make things, and make things much more efficiently than doing it by hand. And so since then, we've just used more and more energy, and still the world every year is using more energy. But I said just that last 10 or so years, people have realised that, hang on, maybe we can actually do more, make more things, but use the same or even less energy to do it. But yeah, the answer is it's still going up, but we're working on it.
That's fascinating. That's very interesting. And I guess it's still going up, but then like we saw from your slides, there are still some parts of the world in which not even 1/4 of the energy that another place gets ever has any. They have to.
Yeah.
They're resorted. They still need to use burning fuel, which is energy,
Yes.
versus perhaps other means.
Yeah, and that market I showed was in India, and there's a huge population in India. They don't use much energy per person. It's quite a small amount, and in fact, you'll see in villages they'll still be cooking on a little wood fire, and that's the only energy they use, really. But not using any energy is not really a good thing either. So a lot of villages, when they suddenly get some energy provided to them, some solar panels provided to them, they can now read at night. They can do homework at night. Fantastic. They can they can get a bit more education. They can make some things a bit more efficiently, have a bit more time to learn new things. And so there's a certain amount of energy that I think everyone needs to have and needs to be able to access and use. But yeah, the variety is huge. And those countries like India, the amount of energy that they are using each year is just going up hugely.
Wow.
And will do for a long time to come.
Yeah, and does energy track with like the sort of quality of life that people have? So do we, if a person has what we would normally call a good quality of life, so they have lots of stuff, say,
Yep.
does that mean that they consume or they use more energy?
They certainly do. There's a lovely graph that I like using for some of my students at university, which shows basically the amount of stuff that a country makes. And there's a term you might hear people talk about on the radio called GDP. It's called gross domestic product. It's a really fancy term by politicians to say, what's the value? How many dollars worth of stuff does a country make each year? And if you plot the amount of stuff a country makes versus the amount of energy a country uses, it's almost like a straight line. So the more stuff you make, the more energy you use. And that's the thing which countries are starting to realise just in the last 20 years. Actually, maybe we can make more stuff without using more energy. And I think that's a really good thing. That's happening. Yeah.
I agree. It's a fascinating part. And one interesting thing I've heard about in some areas, they use, in order to get gas, the energy of gas, they use anaerobic digesters. So like they have like this big, if you don't know what that is, we can talk about it another time. But basically imagine dumping all your rubbish into a pit and then you have a little pipe and all the gas comes up and then like it goes in the trough and then you can use it as like a sort of natural gas.
Yeah.
Basically it's like a big thing full of poo.
Yes. People have made machines that turn poo. I think you're doing some poo making this week.
Oh, we certainly are.
That turn poo into gas and then burn that gas. Yeah, when you're doing that poo, I might have to come back and.
Hey, look, we'll be able to get to that at the end of the show. You just wait right there. But for the moment, we'll barrel ahead. Don't want to give too much away. So let's have a look here now. Here's a very interesting one. So Haley from Summerdale Primary asks, what other foods can we use as fuel? So we've seen corn, which we can turn into ethanol. Don't just put the corn straight into the car, though. It won't work. Unless it's popcorn, then maybe it'll just wreck your car and taste terrible. But are there any other kinds of, any things that we would normally consider food that we can turn into fuel?
Yeah, lollies. I'm afraid kids are going to have to give up lollies from now on because lollies are very high in energy and your parents won't like this, but they are. The problem is with lollies, the energy doesn't last for very long in your body. And so you've probably heard of this sugar rush. You have a lot of sugar and you get really hyper. You've got lots of energy, but then you lose it really quickly. But anything that contains sugar, basically, we can turn into an energy that could be used to run a power station, to run a car, run an aeroplane, if you had enough lollies. And most foods contain sugar in some form or another. It turns out that corn and sugar, obviously, contain sugar in a way that's really easy to convert to ethanol, the type of fuel that we can burn on an engine.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So we could power the school bus with nothing but caramel.
You could. The other thing you can use is fish and chip oil. So, you know, if thinking about food. And in fact, there are some vans who drive around. I don't know that they do that in Tasmania, but they'll drive around fish and chip shops and get their old oil and then sell it or use it to drive. And there was someone very famous who drove around Australia and only filled up from fish and chip shops. He'd go and knock on the door and say, "Hello, have you finished with your fish and chip oil? Can I put it in my car?" Apparently his car really smelt like a fish and chip shop.
That's the aroma of experimenting in science. That's what it smells
Absolutely.
like. Science smells like an old fish and chip shop. Now, here's an interesting one. So this is from one Heather. So, the plastic that is made from corn, is it edible?
Ah, yes and no. I think it is mostly made from corn starch.
Okay.
It's wouldn't be very tasty, but it's also got some other chemicals added to make it a nice stable plastic that will last long enough to hold the things that you buy from the shop and bring it home with. But then it degrades when you put it into landfill or into a compost bin. You could eat it, but I'd recommend Vegemite on toast instead of that.
Now, we are unfortunately rapidly drawing to a close, so we're going to try to get through some more questions. But don't forget, we will answer every single one of your questions by us, and we'll be sending it to you and your teachers tomorrow. So don't worry, we're going to get through all of them. Hang tight. But of course, unfortunately, Evan's energy is running out, so we need to plug him into a battery and then recharge him. So before we skedaddle, let's get just a couple more interesting ones. So here's an interesting one from Luke and Kate, who are being homeschooled, which is, are scientists still thinking of harnessing ocean wave power?
Yes.
So what kind of energy would that be? Is that kinetic?
That's kinetic energy, yes.
See, I'm learning.
Well done. Yeah, I didn't mention that one because it's quite a small resource compared to our world's energy, but it's significant. And in Tasmania, there's quite a lot of it. So any time that you've got waves, consistent waves, scientists and engineers have built devices that go in the sea and move around with the waves and convert that movement, that kinetic energy, into electrical energy, so electricity. And the other one is tides, which is also related to the ocean, of course. When the tide comes in, when the water level goes up around the shore and then goes out again, there's a certain amount of slow kinetic energy there that you can use. Not really very much in Tasmania, but in some parts of the world where the tides move really quickly in through gaps in landforms, then you can use that. Or offshore in places like Bass Strait, where the tide actually rushes quite fast through between the islands. The problem with some of those forms of energy, or not problem, one of the challenges is that energy is being made out in the middle of the ocean or in the sea, and you've got to get it back to land. But yeah, scientists and engineers are working on that and getting it more efficient and lower cost, and we might even see some of that around Tasmania in the next few years. There's some people at the university working on it and trying to get a project up and running, which would be really exciting.
And just as a quick aside, and then you can tell us one more time about the exciting project or the exciting activity you have.
Yeah.
What is geothermal energy? What is that? Can
Yeah.
we do that in Tasmania, or it's just not possible?
That's another one I didn't mention, which I should have done. But if you dig, I love digging holes at the beach, I've got to say. Dig.
exciting.
But if you dig deep enough, like 2 or 3 kilometres below the Earth's surface, even in Tasmania, you start to get rock that's quite warm because it's been capped by this layer of insulating Earth. It's got enough warmth that if you can get some of that heat out, you can turn it into electrical energy or other form of energy that you can use, like heat. And that's known as geothermal. There's some in Tasmania, there's some in the middle of Australia, there's some in New Zealand if you've been there, where it's really close to the surface and you see the steam bubbling up. It's quite hard to get it out. You've got to dig deep holes, put water in and have hot water come out or steam come out.
Oh, wow.
But people are doing some work on it. It's a good resource, just hard to get at.
There you go. So we can't just go into the backyard and start digging and then go, yep, free energy for us.
Not so easily.
Not so energy.
You can go and start digging though. That's always good.
So,
I
sorry.
did want to remind you though, kids. I think the teachers might have got an activity sheet, which is I'd like you to go and try and compare the amount of energy that's used per person in Australia with a few other countries. So pick 4 countries, whatever you like, countries you like the name of, ones you saw in the Olympics, maybe somewhere you've been or you've got family that live. And then I've got some instructions there on how you can look up how much energy they use and calculate how much energy per person. I'd love to see them. If you send them in, I'd have a look, and we maybe can show some on Friday. I'm coming back in on Friday, and I'll even do one myself and share with you.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. That sounds like an activity we can all do, and then compare notes
Absolutely.
and see how much energy. I think, Evan, that I use less energy than you do.
Well, we'll see. And on Friday, we're going to have a look at that, work out how much energy we use around the house. I'm going to turn you all into energy sleuths. So I'd love to see you back on Friday.
Exciting. Evan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been absolutely
pleasure.
fantastic. And we look forward to seeing you again on Friday, where we'll be able to recap and touch on some of those activities that you've touched on. And what are we going to be talking about on Friday with you?
We're going to start thinking about energy at a smaller level. So energy that we use around the house. Yeah, we're going to find out by the end of Friday. I'm going to give you an activity, and you're going to go home on the weekend, and you'll be an energy sleuth. And you'll go around and work out how much energy we're using in your house and where you use it, and also where it comes from. And we're going to draw one of my favourite energy diagrams ever. But I'll keep that for Friday.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the diagram. There we go. Energy, where does it come from and where does it go? Something, Cotton Eye Joe. Evan, thank you so much. And
pleasure.
of course, thank you all for tuning in here again to STEM Alive for Kids. Don't forget, coming up this week, we have a whole bunch of other interesting things. And most specifically, we have our friend Shasta Henry coming in to talk about some insects, but also, as we might have given it away, poo. That's pretty exciting. So come in, tune in, and we will see you all once again tomorrow for STEM Alive for Kids. See you then.